Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Jamaluddin Ramadhan and I'm from second group. Would like to continue the explanation from my friends Habibah Roja that already explained about language and in work field. So let me continue the explanation about cognitive processes. Okay, the first one is definition of cognitive process. Cognitive refers to the mental process to gaining or to acquiring information and to understanding, which includes cognitive processes such as thinking, knowing, judging, and problem solving. Meanwhile, cognitive process, according to Miller and Amos, 1983, stated that psycholinguistics explore or discuss the cognitive processes that enable grammatical and meaningful sentences to be constructed or to be generated, to be created through vocabulary and grammar, or even the processes that enable to understanding of utterance or some expression, phrases, text, and so on. Cognitive processes has a central role for uh, psycholinguistic studies, since cognitive processes is talk about human brain activity and mental process. Let's move on to the next point about language processing. As a matter of fact, the human being has a sense or even what is that property in to process an information or particular language that acquire or came from the daily communication or hearing some sounds, or even when some people say a word, it can be processed in our mind. Okay. Additionally, or furthermore, after gaining a language, the human brain automatically process the information based on countless 2011 language process is divided into several points. The first one is top-down versus bottom-up processing. The second one is serial versus parallel processing, automatic versus control processing, and modularity. The first one is top-down versus bottom-up processing. Top-down and bottom-up is a manner or way to process a language. Both top-down and bottom-up is like just juxtaposed to distinguish the language process that has a different characteristic in each process. In bottom-up process, only information from the input is considered processing and fully affected by its stimulus. In other words, bottom-up processing model only rely on the sounds to determine the language itself. For example, to understand the word file, you would need to process the details of the sounds wave as they come in, which frequencies are louder, which are quieter, how long certain frequencies are loud, and the like. A top-down processing model, on the other hand, adds additional information from higher processes. Let's say that you are listening to speaker after you have asked her for direction to the library. As she answers, someone honks the horn and their car brakes next to you. So part of her answer is obscured. The sound stream that reaches your ear is something like, well, to get to the library, teet, teet. Well, to get to the library, teen, teen. First, you need to blah, blah, blah. So in bottom-up model, you have a set of sounds that you cannot hear because the horn makes them impossible to hear. In top-down model, you maybe use information from your own knowledge of experiences of sentence structure so that you have an experience or have knowledge that the blah 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 re is reversed to the library, so can be it can be automatically recognized from your self experience. So while you definitely hear the car horn, you cannot say exactly which sounds it obscured because you feel that you hear the word library. So clearly, we use bottom-up information when processing language. We need or requires to pay at least some attention to the actual input. Otherwise, we wouldn't actually be listening to people talking to us. The next point is serial versus parallel processing. In serial processing, each step must be finished before the next can begin. In parallel processing, steps might overlap so that one process may not be completely finished before the next one begins. For example, say that we are trying to determine the meaning of word we're hearing. Do we search through a mental list of word entires, or even considering the rejecting until we get to the word that matches that we are hearing? Or do we somehow keep all the possible words in mind at once, considering them all at the same time until one of them becomes the clear winner as parallel approach, or assuming we've gotten the right word, do we need to completely finish the word selection process before turning to placing the word within the sentence structure serial, or can we begin to put structure before we are completely certain what the word is? The next processing is automatic versus control processing. In general, automatic processes are those that do not tax resource very much. In general, they tend to be unintentional, uncontrollable, efficient, and fast. One commonly cited example of an automatic process in our ability to roughly estimate the frequency of events. For example, if you were asked whether red cars are more common than yellow cars, you would be able to easily say that red cars are more frequent, even though you have probably never stood out on a street and made a tally. In terms of language, understanding language sounds is largely done by automatic processes. Meanwhile, controlled processes, in contrast, are those that do require more resources and are slower and can be subject to strategic effects. Imagine trying to learn how to play a new musical instrument at first. You will need to pay close attention to coordinating your hands movement to produce the sound. This a control process, at least at first. It can be automatic through practice. Building up the structure of sentence is also largely a control process. The final is modularity. This actually comes in two flavors. First, there is the degree to which individual processes within language processing are distinct and isolated from each other, and second, there is the degree to which language as a system is distinct and isolated from other cognitive systems. Modular processes are specific to particular domain. They are not spread across multiple areas. Automatic, fast, and not affected by feedback from other processes. From the from the perspective of individual processes within language, this then raises the question of how much different processes interact. For example, is it possible for processes related to connecting words in sentences to interact with the semantic processes necessary to understand them? From the perspective of broader cognitive process, there is also an outstanding question concerning the extent to which language is independent from or modular with respect to other cognitive processes. The next point is language production. Language production processes fundamentally completely different from comprehension processes or cognitive processes in many ways or in many point of view. Meanwhile, people typically recognize the words in their native language quickly and automatically. The same words requires an intention to speak and can take over 5 minutes longer to generate or to create it than to recognize. For example, listeners begin to direct their gaze to the reverence of a spoken noun, even in the absence of highly predictable speech. Before the speaker completes articulation of the word, meanwhile, speakers typically take about 19 meters per second to begin to generate a noun in isolation based on picture object. Language production is logically divided into three major steps. According to language is logically divided into three major steps: deciding what to expression, conceptualization, determining how to expression, formulation, and expressing it. Although receiving goals in conversation structure, narrative, and modulating the ebb and flow of dialogue are inherently important to understanding how people speak. Psycholinguistic studies of language production have primarily focused on the formulation of single isolated utterance. An utterance consists of one or more words spoken together under a single intonational contour or expressing a single idea. Okay, that's all from me. Thanks for watching. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.